The sun had just begun its slow descent, casting a warm golden glow over the village. The air was thick with the aroma of soups cooking and wood smoke, mingling with the distant sound of children's laughter and the rhythmic pounding of a pistol in a mortar. Three elderly women sat on a wooden bench shaded by the broad leaves of a mango tree in a large open compound, surrounded by different buildings, each housing their children and grandchildren respectively. Each woman wore a brightly colored wrapper tied snugly around her waist, the fabric whispering against their legs as they shifted in their reclining chairs. Their walking sticks leaned against the bench like silent protectors worn smooth by years of use. The women, who were a fixture in the village, gathered daily to share news and reminisce about the past. Today, their topic of discussion was particularly juicy. The first woman, with a sly smile, nudged the woman next to her, her eyes narrowing mischievously. She nodded her head towards a young woman passing by, balancing a water pot on her head with effortless grace. "Do you remember whose daughter she is?" the first woman whispered, her tone thick with mischief. The second woman squinted, leaning forward slightly, her eyes struggling to focus in the fading light, tilting her head to get a better look at the young woman. "No, who is she again?" she asked, her voice carrying a hint of impatience. Her mouth hung open as she spoke, revealing teeth that were heavily stained from years of chewing tobacco. "Aha!" the third woman screeched suddenly, laughing excitedly as she clapped her hands like a little girl. She slapped the second woman on the arm, making her jolt in surprise, as a spark of recognition lit up in her eyes. Is she not one of the daughters of that woman who was said to be mad? Her eyes darted from the young woman to her companions, eager to see if they shared in her revelation. Bam! The first woman clapped her hands together, a wide grin spreading across her face, and a mouth missing a few teeth. "Very correct," she said, her voice filled with satisfaction. She leaned back, clearly pleased with herself for having brought up such an interesting subject. "That is the one. Her great-grandmother caused quite the stir back in the day, didn't she?" The other two women nodded vigorously, their faces animated with memories of the past. They leaned in closer, their voices dropping to a conspiratorial whisper as they began to recount the story of the young woman's mother and her great-grandmother. "Ah, yes, I remember now," the second woman said, her voice hushed. "They said her mother would wander the village at night talking to herself. Some even claimed she was cursed, or that she had been bewitched by someone in her husband's family. And don't forget the time she climbed the palm tree in the middle of the market," the third woman added with a chuckle, her eyes twinkling with amusement. "They said she was looking for her sanity up there." "Poor thing," the first woman said, though her tone was more curious than sympathetic. "Her daughters had to grow up with everyone whispering about their mother. It is no wonder they have kept to themselves all these years." As the gossip continued, the young woman with the water pot disappeared around the corner, unaware of the discussion she had sparked among the village elders. The three women watched her go, their eyes following her until she was out of sight. "You know," the third woman said thoughtfully, her voice softening, "people talk, but they never truly know the full story. We see only what is on the surface, never what is hidden underneath." The other two women nodded, a rare moment of reflection passing between them. But just as quickly as it came, it was gone, replaced by the thrill of their next bit of gossip. They leaned in closer again, their voices overlapping as they moved on to the next juicy tidbit, the cool air filled with the sound of their laughter. Meanwhile, at the back of their houses, their granddaughters and daughters-in-law, who were busy with cooking and preparing the evening meals, awaiting the men who had not returned from the farm. We are being pestered by the children as hunger has set in after playing the day away. The busy women sent them to go listening to stories from their grandmothers, who were busy cackling away undisturbed. The women were so engrossed in their gossiping and cackling that they didn't notice the small crowd of children who had gathered around them, eager listeners to the village elders' stories. Some of the children sat cross-legged on the dusty ground, while others stood leaning in close to catch every word. Their faces were bright with curiosity, eyes wide as they hung on every piece of gossip that spilled from the old women's voice. The children waited patiently at first, but when the conversation drifted away from the story of the mad woman, they became unhappy. One of the bolder children, a little girl with her hair in a neat tight braids, stepped forward and tugged gently on the hem of the first woman's wrapper. "Grandma, please," she said, her voice earnest and sweet, "tell us the story of the mad woman who gave birth to warrior daughters." The first woman looked down at the child, her expression shifting from annoyance to mild amusement. She waved her walking stick in the air, attempting to shoo the child away. "Stop disturbing us and go see if your mothers require help in preparing the evening meals," she said, her tone gruff but her eyes twinkling with a hint of affection. The children scattered at her command, retreating a short distance away. But they didn't go far. They hovered just out of reach, whispering amongst themselves. After a moment they returned, their eyes pleading. "Please, Mama," they all chorused, their voices a symphony of childish innocence. The three women exchanged glances, sighing deeply. They knew the children wouldn't leave them alone until they got what they wanted. Finally, the third woman, who had always been the soft-hearted of the three, relented. All right," she said, with a chuckle, motioning for the children to gather closer. "Come, sit down. We will tell you the great folk story about the woman who ran mad but gave birth to legends." The children quickly found spots at the feet of the elderly women, their faces lighting up with anticipation. The third woman leaned back on her chair, tapping her walking stick rhythmically on the ground as she began to speak, her voice taking on the rhythm of a storyteller. "It was many years ago in this very village," she began, her eyes growing distant as she cast her mind back to the past. "There was a woman named Adana, known for her beauty and her spirit. She was as fierce as the Hamatan wind and as untamed as the river during the rainy season. But life, you see, has a way of testing the strongest amongst us." The first woman nodded, adding in her gravelly voice, "Adana was married to a wealthy man who was loved by the people, but as time went on, she began to change. She would speak to things unseen, wander amongst the streets at odd hours, and sing songs only she seemed to know. People said she had lost her mind, that perhaps she had gone mad." The second woman chimed in, her tone softer, almost reverent. But in her madness, there was a kind of wisdom. She would say things that others feared to speak of. She would call out the injustice done in the dark, the secrets people hid behind closed doors. Many were afraid of her, and they called her mad because they did not understand, nor do they want her ways. The third woman smiled at the children, who were now completely captivated by the tale. Despite all this, Adana bore daughters, each more remarkable than the last. These daughters grew up amidst whispers and stares, but they carried their mother's spirit within them. They were strong, fierce, and unafraid. And when the time came, each of them proved to be a warrior in her own right. One of the children, a boy with wild, eager eye, couldn't help but interrupt. "What did they do, Grandma? How did they become warriors?" The third woman chuckled, gently patting the boy's head. "Patience, child," she said softly. patience, all in good time. The children gathered closer, their eyes wide with anticipation as the third woman continued, her voice steady and filled with the suspense of the tale. You see, Adana, the woman who was said to be mad, gave birth to her daughters, and each daughter was unique with her own strength and skills. But all of them were fierce warriors, trained from a young age by their mother, even in her madness. Or perhaps it was because of it. Adonne knew things others didn't. She saw the potential in her daughters and taught them to harness their strength, to fight with both bodies and their mind. The first woman nodded, taking up the story. These sisters were unlike anyone the village had ever seen. They were so strong that even the bravest of men feared to challenge them. They could outrun the fastest gazelle, lift stones that no man could lift, and wield weapons with a skill unmatched in all the land. Their mother's teachings had made them fierce, but she had also instilled in them a deep sense of honor, humility, and kindness. The second woman leaned forward, her voice dropping to a whisper as if she is revealing a secret. No one could remember the source of their strength, she said. Some said it came from the spirit. Others whispered that their mother had made them apart with the gods. But whatever the reason, one thing was clear. These sisters were a force to be reckoned with. And because of them, the kingdom stopped being attacked. No enemy dared to cross the borders, for none who faced the sisters in battle ever survived. The children gasped in awe, their imaginations running wild with the images of the sisters standing tall and unyielding on a battlefield, their eyes blazing with determination. But despite their power, the third woman continued, these sisters were known for their humility and kindness amongst the villagers. They used their strength to protect the weak, to help those in need, and to ensure that justice was served. They were loved by all, and their deeds became the stuff of legend. The king himself rewarded them greatly. He bestowed upon them lands and riches, making them amongst the wealthiest in the kingdom. But even with all this wealth, the sisters remained humble, always ready to lend a hand of help or to offer a kind word. Their strength was matched only by their generosity and kindness. As they grew older, many men came from far and wide, seeking their hands in marriage. Each sister chose a man who admired not just their beauty but their strength and wisdom, and so they married and continued to live in the village, raising families of their own. The third woman concluded with a gentle smile. And so, my children, the story of the seven warrior sisters reminds us that true strength lies not just in our muscles, but in our hearts. It teaches us that kindness and humility are as powerful as any weapon, and the greatness can be found in even the most unexpected places. The children cheered and clapped, their faces bright with excitement and admiration. They could hardly contain their joy, imagining themselves as brave and kind as the seven sisters. As the children were called away by their mothers to come eat, the three women sat back, a sense of contentment settling over them, their eyes twinkling with the joy of having passed on yet another tale of their village's rich history. The children ran inside their respective houses to heed their mothers' calls for the evening meals. The three old women remained outside, patiently awaiting theirs. The evening air grew cooler and the last light of day began to fade, casting long shadows across the village. The women's thoughts lingered on the young woman who had sparked the evening tale, a great granddaughter of the last of the seven warrior sisters. Do you think their madness is hereditary? The third woman asked, her voice low and contemplative, disrupting the silence that had overtaken them after the children left. Or could it be that her daughters are destined to become legends like their ancestors? especially seeing as she is mad just like Adana. This woman nodded slowly, her eyes distant. Hmm, I have pondered on that too, she said, her mind clearly wandering far away, lost in thoughts that seemed to stretch back through the generations. The other two women waited, expecting her to continue, but she seemed to drift deeper into her thought, her mouth slightly open as if she was about to speak, but had forgotten what she wanted to say. Second woman, feeling frustrated, clicked her tongue in irritation. When you know you will not finish a sentence, why do you start at all? She hissed, her tone sharp with impatience. The first woman, snapping back to the present, shot the second woman a glare. Don't dare start your nonsense. You and your short temper should be far from me this evening, she retorted, her voice edged with a strong warning. Sensing the tension rising between her friends, the third woman quickly stepped in, her tone firm but gentle. Can't the both of you be in the same space without quarreling for once? Please, let's set a good example for our children and our grandchildren who are watching us. The three women turned to look behind them and saw their grandchildren indeed watching from the verandas of their various homes, their eyes wide as they ate their evening meals, clearly amused by the bickering of their grandmothers. The first woman cleared her throat, regaining her composure. What I was trying to say, she began again, was that it seems this madness befalls them when our people are in need of saving of some sort. It is as if the madness is a sign that a protector is amongst us. The second woman, her anger dissipating, nodded thoughtfully. You could be right. I mean, look at the way these unknown marauders are destroying our farmlands and stealing our livestock. Perhaps this girl is meant to help us now, just like her ancestors did before her. The third woman frowned, her brow furrowed in thought. But why must madness be a signal for our salvation? Why does it seem that chaos precedes their strength? The three women sat quietly, pondering on this question, their minds turning over the strange pattern of fate and destiny that seemed to bind their village. As they sat, they could hear the faint sounds of their sons and grandsons returning from the fields, their voices carrying through the twilight as they spoke of the day's work and the troubles they faced. The first woman sighed deeply, her eyes still on the grandchildren who watched them with rapt attention. Perhaps, she said softly, it is not madness at all, but a different kind of wisdom, a deeper connection to something we cannot understand. Maybe these daughters are closer to the spirit world, able to see and do things we cannot. So we termed it madness. The second woman nodded in agreement. Or maybe it is their way of preparing for the battles to come, to see beyond the ordinary and to find strength where others see only weakness. The third woman smiled, a small, knowing smile. Then let us not fear what we do not understand. We must learn to embrace people and empathize with their situation. That way we can build instead of pulling down. With that, the three women sat in comfortable silence, each lost in her own thought, but united in their hope that whatever the reason for that family ordeal, with united front, everyone can be helped. And so the village settled into the night, the sounds of laughter, conversations, and the clatter of dishes filling the air. The three women, now quiet and contemplative, knew that the stories they would tell was far from over. See you all next time. Bye.